Okay, good evening and welcome to the first in our new series of webinar events aimed at our students and our most recent graduates. This event tonight is part of our 2024 Community and Giving Week event programme and is run as part of our Young Stanners Society. We've launched our Community and Giving Week today, so don't forget to follow along on hashtag St Anne's Community Giving Week 2024. That's St Anne's CGW 2024. There's lots of exciting things happening in college this week. These webinars came about in response to requests from young Stanners for support in their early careers. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome two St Anne's alumni, Mark Hawley and Katie Burgess, who are going to be in discussion about how they made the transition from Oxford University into the world of work. If you're interested in finding out more about the Young Stanners Society, please do follow the links in the comments section. Or if you are with us live this evening, do just go to our St Anne's College website and you'll find the Young Stanners webpage. So I'm now going to hand you over to Susan Doering, who is another St Anne's alum, and she will be our host and moderator for tonight's conversation. Many thanks to you, Mark, Katie, and Susan for agreeing to take part in this event. Over to you.
Stacey, thank you very, very much indeed for that warm welcome, and a warm welcome from me and from Katie and Mark to you all, to you young Stanners. It's really rather fun to be with you this evening, and we hope that the conversation will spark all sorts of ideas and be also helpful in your thoughts about your career, wherever you are in your career, whether you're still at St Anne's and you're thinking about the future, or whether you're just about to leave, or whether you've already started your career. We know that several of you, you're in your career and you're thinking about how to move forward. So we hope, as I said, that this conversation that Katie and Mark will have will spark some ideas in you. I'm going to ask Mark and Katie to introduce themselves. Just a couple of words about me. I graduated from St Anne's many years ago and actually went into academia first, and then for personal reasons, I left academia. I did my PhD at Vienna University and taught there for many years, but then moved into the world of international organizations. I worked for the UN for many, many years, facilitating, training their staff all over the world. And along the way, I got myself a coaching qualification. And what I have been doing for the last 15 years is coaching individuals and groups, particularly on career transitions. So that's really who I am and why I was asked, I think, to moderate this conversation. But the stars, the people who are really interesting, are Mark and Katie. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Perhaps I could start with Mark.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Hawley. I studied French at St Anne's and I graduated back in 2013, which is just a little bit over 10 years ago, which is quite terrifying to say. After graduating from St Anne's, having studied languages, felt that the right thing for me to do was to work in an embassy, and I had these dreams that I was going to become the British ambassador to France, and in my mind it all really made sense, and it was all like logical step for me, but I didn't really know how to do it, and it didn't really work out. So in the end, I had a few different jobs before ultimately ending up at Google, where I am now. I worked first at a private equity research firm, which didn't last very long. I then joined KPMG on their management consulting graduate scheme. There I spent 5 years working in mergers and acquisitions. And then in 2019, I joined Google, where I currently lead our people and analytics workforce planning team, covering Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. The role is essentially helping Google to calculate how many people we're going to hire each year and where we're going to open new offices throughout the region. and help Google to build a representative and diverse workforce. That being said, I am currently on parental leave. I am in month 6 of 6 months of parental leave. My husband and I welcomed a son into the world back in September. So I'm currently not working daily, but I'll be back at Google on April the 2nd. So just a few weeks left, unfortunately.
Very soon. Yes.
Very soon.
I think the most pressing thing to say, sort of immediately, spontaneously, is congratulations on your parenthood.
Thank you.
You and your husband. So I mean, I think that's absolutely wonderful, and but fascinating. You know, your development, how your career has developed. Certainly, you know, you've ended up somewhere which you didn't expect when you got out from Oxford. So obviously,
absolutely.
Talk a lot about that. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Burgess. So I also joined St Anne's in 2009, where I met Mark at the beginning of our 13-year friendship, which is quite terrifying. I studied law, actually, and I graduated in 2012. I now work at Shelter, which is, many of you might have heard of it, but it's a national housing and homelessness organisation. So at Shelter, I lead their planning, financial planning and analysis team. So my role is planning budgets, forecasts, deciding where we can invest our donations and contract income in supporting people and hopefully campaigning to end the housing emergency. And I've done a variety of different things since I left St Anne's. I guess in 2012, I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted a career in law. So I did some law, some non-law internships. Actually, like Mark, I started off at one of the sort of the big four, the accountancy firms. I worked at EY for about 5 or 6 years. I've worked in international tax, so I did quite a lot of transactional work. Also, rather like Mark, I haven't been copying Mark my life, but we have done quite similar things. Yeah, so I worked in London and I did a brief stint in New York as well. After that, I kind of decided I wanted to leave the corporate world and I wanted to sort of pursue a career in the charity sector, which actually, looking back, I think is something I kind of knew I was always interested in. I remember I was charities rep in the JCR at St Anne's, so an early indication of that. So I left EY and I joined Shelter and I've been working there for about 4 years. So it was quite a sort of career shift for me in terms of sort of obviously the sector and the type of work I do as well. And I've also been a trustee for a local sort of small charity for a few years as well.
Yes, so lots of similarities in both substantive, sort of the kind of work you have done, things that you've done along the way, and also the fact that, you know, in those 10+ years, you use the word transition, Katie, you know, that you've had different moves to different sectors and sort of finding your way. Now, we have had, as you both know, but just so that everybody who's on the call knows, we've had several questions sent in for this evening for our conversation. So I am obviously going to use those questions and put those questions to Katie and Mark. And thank you, all of you who did send in a question. But let's just stay perhaps with this question of or issue or problem, or is it a problem? I don't know, of transitioning. Sort of, you know, you studied law, so a lot of people would say, okay, study law, very clear, I'm either going to be an in-house lawyer or I'm going to become a solicitor or a barrister. It's a very clear career path for somebody who studies law, but it wasn't. So talk a little bit about that, Katie.
Yeah, I think for me, I think when I was at St Anne's, obviously, and I'm sure it's the same now for students, you get kind of approached by law firms and you kind of get taken out for meals, and I did some sort of law internships and things as well. And I remember, for me personally, I quite liked kind of the sort of more of the kind of the logical, the kind of black letter law, and I wasn't really that sure that doing something that was kind of quite a lot more commercial was really something for me. I guess kind of going into law, to be honest, going into law aged 18, I assumed that I would be defending criminals. That was the only thing I really knew about. So I guess the careers that I kind of learned about when I was at St Anne's in the city weren't necessarily kind of what I thought my degree would translate into. So I guess at that point for me, that kind of started me thinking, oh, do I want to be a solicitor? And then I guess from there, that I suppose opened up to me to thinking like, okay, so what other professional things could I do if I didn't want to necessarily be a solicitor? And I think I always quite liked maths. And I'm quite a numerical person, and I kind of thought, oh, well, maybe I'd like to do a career that involves that as well. So yeah, I guess that was kind of the start, I suppose, but not necessarily
yes,
that's the sort of
that's the sort of mindset that started you off somewhat, moving to a different direction.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Does any of this resonate with you, Mark?
Yes, I mean, I think when transitions are things that we go through all the time, and I think immediately leaving Oxford, I felt this huge transition of for a long time, St Anne's and Oxford offer you real structure. There are things that are going to happen every term. You have your collections, fifth week blues, all these things that you hear every single term, and then finals, and you just have this such structure in your life when you're at Oxford, and then you have to transition out of that, and you have this identity of, I'm an Oxford student at St Anne's, but then you have to transition very quickly once that all ends. You're constantly working towards finals, and they become almost like, this is going to dictate my life, and I've got to put everything into finals, and then all of a sudden that switches off, and you're like, well, now I need to transition into the workforce. And that's a big change, and it's a real thing that I don't think I was really prepared for, because I was so narrowly focused on trying to get a good mark. So yeah, I mean, graduating in French, I didn't really get taken out for dinner by any law firm or anyone like that. so it was more,
or any ambassador.
No one took me for dinner at all, unfortunately. But no, it was it was a transition from day one, and I think that's how you can think about careers as well, is that from day one of graduating, that is essentially your career pathway, and that's setting you up for the journey that each of us take.
Yeah. One of the questions that was sent in was, what is something talking about when you went from you went down from Oxford, you're not a student anymore, and you're starting a first job, you're looking for a first job. What somebody asked a really great question. What is something that you experienced that no one told you about, but you wish you had known?
I'm happy to go first. I wish I'd known, that I was more than an Oxford graduate. I think, I came from a state school which sent very few people to Oxford, and coming to St Anne's almost, it didn't inflate my ego. That's not the phrase I'm looking for, but it really did make me think oh wow, I'm now an Oxford student, and that's amazing. And back home there aren't many of us, and I felt that immediately, as I talked earlier about that transition to the workforce. I felt that, it sounds embarrassing to say it now, but I genuinely thought I could turn up to any company and be like, I went to Oxford, and that's going to get me the job. That's going to make me the ambassador to France, but it doesn't. And then it's good that it doesn't, because because we need people from every university to work at different companies. It shouldn't just be Oxford students who work at companies. but there was something good in that. There's something positive in knowing that you are more than just an Oxford student. You are a very talented individual. You're probably very well-rounded individuals. And, you know, although sometimes at St. Anne's, I felt like, you know, my degree took a lot and I gave a lot to it. When you leave university, you know, and you start looking for your first job, I would say, just remember that really, you are more than an Oxford student, you're more than an Oxford graduate, you're now part of a very big, very large workforce. And of course, some of the skills that you built at Oxford and you developed at Oxford will be incredibly beneficial, like time management and, you know, passion for your work. Well, they will help a lot, but never lose sight of the fact that you are more than just the Oxford word on your CV.
Great, thank you. Katie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree with you about that, Mark. And I think that kind of as you go through work, you end up working with people, obviously people who've gone to all sorts of different universities and people who've had all sorts of different life experiences as well. And you see that people, you know, people bring a whole host of things to a job, which might be, you know, obviously increasingly as you get older, it's where people have worked before and you know, things that they've done inside and outside of work as well. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Mark. I think that something else for me was that if you leave Oxford and you join a graduate scheme, which both me and Mark did within sort of 2 years, I think, of leaving, my experience of that is, in some ways, it's quite reassuring because you're kind of on another treadmill in a less negative way. You've got another structure. You know, if you do well in your kind of intake and things, there's a clear path to becoming a partner or director or whatever it is in the company you work for. But I think what's really important not to lose sight of is that you need to keep some headspace, I would say, for yourself. So think about, if you want to do that, brilliant. But if you don't want to do that, have a think about, you know, what alternatives and what other things you might like to do, because no one's going to give you those alternatives.
Yourself.
Yeah.
And I, you know, from my personal experience and also from my coaching work, you know, career coaching, I think what is so important is that to realize, exactly as you've just said, that to realize that you do have options. You don't have to stay on that treadmill.
Yeah, absolutely.
You may be absolutely right. You know, it might be absolutely the right place for you, right? But to ask yourself, am I really enjoying this? Am I living my values? Am I doing what I want, what I'm really interested in? Is this the right place for me? It's okay to ask that. And then, you know, and then to look at what other options would there be, you know? So that's really encouraging from both of you, I think. And in fact, this ties in with somebody else, with another question that one of our participants sent in. Figuring out which is the right route for us is sometimes very difficult, and priorities can change. They're absolutely right there. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you experienced that and what helped you make your career decisions, your career transitions. Mark, do you want to go first?
I can go first. Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering if Katie wants to go first. No, absolutely. I think yes, it is a tough career environment, and it's hard sometimes to prioritize, you know, what to do and how you should focus on yourself or focus on your career. When I first joined Google, I had a manager who was a real like inspiration to me, and she has become over the last 5 years almost a mentor and someone who supported me very much. And one of the first things that she told me as I transitioned into this new company was a phrase which is nothing blooms all year round. And I don't know if there are any biologists at St. Anne's who can say there are things that bloom all year round, but I don't know any plants that bloom all year round. and that's really stuck with me during my
Yeah.
my time at Google. Like, you can't be 100% all year round.
Yeah.
You can't be the best that you can be at all times, and that is something which I think I didn't always accept, and I didn't always want to hear when I was starting out in my career, because as exactly as Katie said earlier, you have in your mind, I'm going to reach these milestones and I'm going to hit this promotion at this point, and I'm going to hit this promotion at that point. I think what really has grounded me is knowing that, like, a career is very much a marathon and it's not a sprint, and you're probably not going to do your first job and think it's your dream job. And that's what I found very quickly. I did my first job after St. Anne's I think I did it for 7 months, and then I hated it so much that I went traveling around the world, because I just thought, I can't do this job anymore. And to me, I feel like I need to escape. So I did. I physically escaped the UK
Right.
for a little while.
But that was a brave decision, to say, I'm going to stop. This isn't for me.
Yeah, it's exactly. And I think, what really made me do that is knowing that a career is a very long time. A career is not defined by your first job. It's probably not defined by your second job either. A career, when you graduate St. Anne's, if you're in your early 20s, or if you're later than that, you still have many decades ahead of, like, probably working, and you're not going to probably achieve your career dreams in those first few years, because you shouldn't have that expectation on yourself, and also it's just not a realistic expectation to have anyway. So I think that's how I have thought about the career environment and prioritizing what I want to do. And I've always thought to myself, good work-life balance is essential, and a good work-life balance brings sustained performance, and it helps you perform better, because you are not giving 100% of yourself to a job. You are remembering to look after yourself and think about mental health and well-being, and it's easier said than done sometimes. I know, like, sometimes you think, like, oh, I can push myself a bit further, like when you have an essay crisis and you're like, I'll just work all night tonight, but you wouldn't work all night every night, hopefully.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So important to think about one's mental and, of course, physical health, to
Absolutely.
that also keep that in your sights. Katie?
Yeah, I just sort of building on what Mark say about kind of it, you always need to think you can't go 100% all the time, and kind of keep capacity, and but preserving the battery for really busy times. I would also say, and I think you realise this once you've left one workplace, is nobody is irreplaceable. And sometimes you see people working such long hours and really burning themselves out. And to be completely honest, if you work for a really big company 2 months later, no one's really going to remember. And nobody will tell you that in the job. And I think, when you're working really long hours, that you can just so easily kind of lose sight of what's important, and you can think, oh, this project, completely depends on me working a 60-hour week or something. But I just think you can get incredibly stressed about things, and definitely, and sort of when I was in my 20s and I was working on sort of transactional work, I used to get really, really stressed and have problems sleeping. But I think sometimes a good thing to think in hindsight is, in 3 months' time, will I remember what I was stressed about? And the answer is almost always no. So yeah.
And sort of just as a perhaps as a footnote to that, I think what's also, yes, you've got your job and you're going to do your best at it, aren't you? You really are going to give it as much as you possibly can. But you've also got to think about your mental and physical health, as you both mentioned. 100%. But the other thing that you've also got to think about, from my point of view as a career coach, is your career. And I think you've said it sort of, between the lines, I've heard it, that working hard and, doing an all-nighter several times, and, even having sleepless nights, as you've just talked about, Katie, and even producing that wonderful, the project end and everything, everybody's happy. But that alone is not going to help you have the career that you want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're both nodding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, completely. And
yeah,
sorry, go on.
Both of you.
No, I was just going to say, and also it's. I also think what we don't talk about very much, and something that you're not really prepared for, is actually asking people for help and asking people for support.
Yes.
And I think that was when I joined. I mentioned this individual earlier, but my first manager at Google, she, I wasn't looking for a mentor and I wasn't looking for someone to support me. I didn't really actually want to ask for help because I had just joined Google, and there's this thing called imposter syndrome where people join big organizations and they think they're not good enough. And you have this feeling of, oh, well, I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to look like, oh, why did we hire this person? Or like, this person probably wasn't actually the right fit for the company. But I have found, a mentor or someone who supports you, doesn't need to be formally named as a mentor, just having someone who you can talk to, and having someone who you can bounce ideas off and you can get advice from, and they can spot opportunities for you, has helped so much. And again, it's a question of there probably are some people that you want to be your mentor, and there probably will be some people that you do not want to be your mentor, and that's also a question of like identifying who those people are. But that's something which I don't think I had thought enough about, but once I actually engage with the idea, it's been incredibly valuable in my career.
I think also doing sort of self-reflection is quite important, and I think something I don't do this, but I know people who do this, it always sounds like a good idea, is going back to kind of their CV every 3 months or every 6 months and thinking, okay, what experiences have I had over the last 3 months that have kind of been new experiences that I could talk about in an interview, that I've developed, skills that I've developed, and just keeping going back to that, because I think like we've all been kind of alluding to, you can get very kind of task focused and sort of tunnel vision on the job you're doing rather than how it fits into the skills that you're developing more broadly. And also I think kind of thinking about, okay, what haven't I been good at and what do I still need to develop as well. I think that's equally really important to do that as well.
Yeah,
I agree.
And that is, of course, also the sort of thing that somebody who is in a kind of mentor role can help you with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are all sorts of, as you said, this person perhaps didn't start out as an official mentor. There are organizations, corporations that have official mentoring programs. And if there is such a mentoring program in the company that you're in, sign up for it. It's a great thing. But you can also do it, in an informal way. If you find somebody, it doesn't have to be your immediate line manager. Very often it is, but quite often too it isn't. It's just somebody that you get to know through a work project perhaps, and that person can then you build up some sort of professional relationship where that is then the person that you go to and say, would you have 20 minutes to talk about something? And that can be really, really helpful. Of course, there are other mentoring programs that are completely external, that one can do. Sometimes they're quite expensive, but they can be useful. So it's always a question of what am I going to invest in my career? So there are mentoring programs, but there are also, of course, career coaches like myself. A little bit really to continue this idea, and you both have talked about sort of the career environment. And we did have a question, how can you stay focused on your goals? And you've talked about self-reflection, Katie, which I couldn't agree more, is really, really important. But the question was about how do we stay focused on our goals in tough career environments? Should we work overtime and prioritize our work early on in our career, or keep this mindset of a good work-life balance, in view, but perhaps this person said, then risk not getting promoted so fast. Do you have any views on that?
Personally,
go on, Katie, go on, you go first.
I would say, personally, I would say you should always start out with the mindset of having a good work-life balance, because ultimately there will be times when that has to go out the window for, a really busy period or something. And also I think that, and I think kind of Mark, you said this earlier, that having a good work-life balance and trying to kind of keep time for yourself does ultimately help you perform better at work. So I don't think it's necessarily kind of either you put all the overtime in or you risk not getting promoted, because I think that you need that time to kind of put aside for yourself, to think about, what have I achieved? How can I kind of sell myself in the best way possible, put myself in the best possible light for a promotion? Yeah, I just think kind of having those boundaries is really super important.
Yeah,
I completely agree with what Katie said. I would just say, I heard this question and I immediately remembered feeling this way, and I immediately remember graduating from St. Anne's and almost telling myself, I will sacrifice my 20s for a successful 30s. And looking back, I would never encourage that now. I know that's a lot easier said than done, and I know the pressure to feel like that you need to, work overtime and that you need to remain focused on your career. Everything in addition to what Katie just said, the only thing I would think about is there are many things that you can't control in your career, and there are many things that you can't control in the wider economy. The individuals who graduated from St. Anne's in 2020 and 2021 were hit with the COVID pandemic, and the individuals that graduated 5 years before them, that could have had also could have had a significant impact on their career as well. I remember a lot of friends who had these amazing job offers in 2020 pulled away from them because the companies were no longer hiring, and the companies, no longer had those opportunities for them. And that wasn't the fault of the individuals. That wasn't any reflection on them. And although it could have impacted their career prospects or their milestones, they just, you had to just say, I can't control that, and I can't, carry that with me as in my own responsibility. And it's not just COVID, there's recession, things go up and down, and in the course of all of our careers, we'll have to navigate many recessions and many booms. And, you have to think of the entirety of the context that we all work in. We're not just here by ourselves in control of everything. There are many things that can't be controlled. And if we focus too much on, I'm just going to work really, really hard in the short term and forego my work-life balance because it'll help me get that, you don't know what's around the corner, unfortunately, and you don't have that certainty and that guarantee of it will all work out and I will reap the rewards for everything I've invested. So not to be too negative, to do say, just having worked for 10 years now, I think you do get this sense of, actually there's a lot here that I can't control and I can't change if it goes wrong.
So important. Thank you both for that. I think what you can control is yourself.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
That's really the self-reflection that you were talking about, Katie. That's when that can really kick in, and and what can I do What can I do to maintain my equilibrium, my sanity, my safety, my good health, etc., etc. Right. So let's talk now perhaps a little bit about, more specifically your careers, because one of the questions that came in was, are there aspects of your careers which you now realize were signs leading you down a more fulfilling career path? Because you've had these transitions. So essentially, what should we be looking out for at the beginning of our careers as signs to help us determine which types of roles we would be best suited to? Katie, would you like to go first on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, I was always interested in sort of volunteering. So when I worked at EY, they had sort of a charitable trust of EY Foundation, where you could sign up to kind of do very limited sort of review work for social enterprises and kind of talk to them about how they might grow and how they were doing. And I signed up for doing that. And that was kind of, I think I could see that I really enjoyed doing that, and I really kind of enjoyed talking to the representatives from those social enterprises about sort of their wider strategy. And I think for me, that made me realize that I wanted a role that wasn't kind of super technical, because at the time I was working in international tax, which is very, very technical. And I enjoyed kind of having those overall sort of, they weren't super strategic, but they were just kind of more kind of rounded conversations with people about their organization. So I think it was that sort of experience which made me realize that I found it really fulfilling to basically work with organizations that I knew had a public good purpose. And I was interested in sort of a more rounded, sort of less technical role. So kind of applying that in a more useful way to everybody listening, I think it's just trying to, it's very cheesy, but take the most of opportunities, and try and just, when you're doing them, think about what sort of thing, what it is about them, quite simply, that you're enjoying about them. And then you can start kind of doing some research on, different jobs, different companies, and go from there. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think an aspect of my career that I think really changed my career path and made me feel a lot more confident with my career path was just the realization that you should find a company that you want to work for, not the company that wants you to work for them, if that makes sense. So, as a St. Anne's graduate and as an Oxford graduate, I was saying earlier that you're not just an Oxford graduate, but, you will have a lot of companies that can see your CV and say, like, absolutely, we want you to come and work here. But reframing that in, well, actually, I want to work for you because, as Katie said, I agree with your values. I agree with the work that you're doing. That actually helps you move down a career path which feels more fulfilling, because it's nice to be wanted, and it's nice for a company to, reach out to you on LinkedIn or, I don't know, invite you to an interview. It's nice to feel that, I'm wanted, but it's also more important, I think, to actually want that company as well, and to have a reason why you want that company. Similarly with Katie, it was actually like the extracurricular activities that I got involved in when I was at KPMG that kind of led me in the path that I wanted to. So as I said earlier, I joined KPMG's graduate scheme. That's the word I'm looking for. And I started off doing accountancy exams, and I did accountancy exams having not studied anything mathematical since my GCSEs. And I thought, why am I doing this? This is not me, but I felt like it's what I should be doing. I felt like I needed something. And I did these accountancy exams and, somehow passed them, but didn't really feel like even passing them gave me any sense of satisfaction or fulfillment. And I've always been very motivated in supporting women in the workplace. And I sent an email to KPMG, the head of KPMG's Women's Network, and I asked if I could, join the committee and help because of the importance of allyship. And the woman replied to me and said, "Can I meet you for a coffee?" And I thought, oh, okay, I'll meet her for a coffee. And I met her for a coffee. And the first thing she said to me is, the reason why I asked to meet you for a coffee is because I thought this was a prank. I thought you were joking because you're the first male who's ever asked to be involved in the KPMG Women's Network. And the reason why I tell that story is because it was just a funny way of getting, closer to actually what I've truly found fulfilling. And I worked with the KPMG Women's Network, and I was the first male on the committee back in 2014. And that sense of fulfillment actually meant so much more to me than passing my accountancy exams, because that genuinely was what I was interested in now. And now I manage a team, and our role is basically looking at whether our women software engineers and whether our women computer scientists that we can approach to work for Google. So looking back, it was kind of the extracurricular activities that Katie was talking about that do give you a sense of fulfillment. And I didn't really expect that from just sending an email to a woman who thought I was pranking her. But I'm glad I did that. And it was that sense of, actually, this is a better direction for me because I genuinely feel something here. And I thought I would feel something by passing my accountancy exams, but I didn't feel anything. So it came as a surprise, I guess, is what I'm really trying to get at.
But interesting that you say it came as a surprise. The surprise was perhaps the reaction from outside, but what you were doing was being true to yourself.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point.
And if if one can do that, then one will be, there's that horrible word authentic, which I really don't like, but it does mean that I'm asking myself, what can I offer me? This I'm an individual. I'm not the same as the next person. We're all different, and what can I offer this company, and and of course, what can the company offer me?
Absolutely.
And those are sort of very fundamental questions. Just to go back a little bit, Katie, you talked about your transition, and you're ideally placed. What would you say are the pros and cons of being in the corporate world or the public sector, the charity sector? Can you give us a bit of an overview of your feelings on that?
Yeah, so I would say one of the big pros of being in the corporate sector is the sort of the training and the development opportunities, and also fundamentally the fact that they will pay for things. So like Mark, I did accountancy exams, I had all of it paid for. They paid for me to live in a flat in central New York for 3 months. Like no charity is going to pay for that. So I think, starting out in your career, there are lots of benefits of working for a corporate. I also kind of, I think socially, to some extent, joining somewhere that's got sort of a big intake. I'm not from London, neither of us from London, and I think joining somewhere where, a new city that you don't know that many people can be really nice if you are sort of in a big intake with lots of people your age. So I think I think there are lots of pros, kind of particularly at the beginning of your career. I think the pros of being in the charity sector, there is definitely a different work culture. I think that there's sort of an appreciation that you're doing the job because you are interested in the cause and you're passionate about it, and because of that, people are kind of interested in other things that you're passionate about. So, for example, I'm a trustee, lots of my colleagues are trustees, and people will take time out of work to go to trustee meetings. Like the finance director will take, he always seems to be at trustee meetings, and not always, but yeah, I think there's sort of an appreciation more of, and certainly in my experience of kind of you as a whole person and what other things you're kind of passionate and interested about. And yeah, I kind of think they're probably the main kind of pros and cons from my perspective. Just, this is slightly off topic, but just kind of going back to something we were saying earlier about kind of being the importance of being someone that's kind of values led and kind of thinking about kind of when to leave somewhere. I think one of the kind of the big sort of positives and learning experiences that I got from being at EY was getting quite a lot of people management experience. And I think that you can be somewhere and you can kind of know, I think at this point when I became sort of a project manager and a line manager, I knew that it wasn't the career for me, and my line manager, who definitely also knew this was not the career for me, said, Katie, like, just stay on for a year, and then you've got that manager skills on your CV, and then you can go and do whatever you want to do, but you'll have that, and you can, that's very, very transferable. So I think that yeah, like, definitely, great to be somewhere that's sort of more kind of values led, and I like Mark have been saying that's so important, but I think sometimes you have to kind of choose when you change, and I think it's important to kind of try and plan and think, have I got the best opportunities I can get from where I'm working at the moment. Yeah.
Well, you just used a word that I'd like to take it over to Mark. Planning. What your transition from accountancy to working for Google, was that something that you could have planned, should have planned, or what were the factors that made it happen?
I mean, yeah, I wish I'd planned it, because then I could have done it sooner. That would have been the benefit of having planned it. But no, I didn't really plan it. And I think it's exactly what Katie said. I felt I'd stayed there for 5 years and I'd really exhausted my learning potential there. I had become a manager. I had done many different types of projects, some interesting, some less interesting, but I'd really felt like I had plateaued from a development perspective, and I had got the skills out of the company that I needed, and I'd got the skills out of the role that I needed. It was partly that, and it was also partly circumstantial. It was for the last year and a half that I worked at KPMG, I flew from London to Amsterdam every week. And I know we've been saying the importance of work-life balance, and maybe it sounds a little hypocritical to say that I flew for a year and a half to Amsterdam from London. But what really happened that changed everything was my husband's German, and he moved to London. And, for me to fly every week to Amsterdam, it just wasn't feasible, and it wasn't something that I could sustain anymore. I really had to take a look at myself and say, is this the career for me? Being a management consultant, you are expected to travel. It's you don't have a choice. If I wanted to say I don't want to go to Amsterdam anymore, they'd say, okay, well, how about Switzerland? You go to Switzerland every week now, and that's genuinely what the reality was that we were working in. And so I had to look at it from different perspectives and say, I've got everything out of this role that I'm going to, and I can't really see where I can take it from a development perspective. circumstantially in my life, like I want to have a better work-life balance, and this is not a good work-life balance, so I need to make a change. Google, again, it's kind of what I came onto earlier. Like, I decided one day that, you know, enough is enough, and that's easier said than done as well, because then you have to carve out time to like look at other companies and look at what else is out there. And sometimes, you know, you feel so pressured to work really hard that sometimes it's difficult to say, like, actually, I'm going to take an hour now to look, you know, for a company that really aligns with my values and is somewhere where I want to work. So I don't think it was planned. Like, I wish I'd planned it, but I didn't feel like I had the capacity to plan it, because I felt, you know, I was constantly unpacking and then repacking a suitcase for next week's travel, and trying to fit a social life and, like, you know, personal life all around the commitments of work. But it does just get to the point where you have to make the decision for yourself, and you have to say, actually, I'm going to do this for me. I know there's a lot of discussion around, like, you know, does networking help you get into the role? Personally, I'm not someone who thrives in networking. I don't particularly enjoy networking. You know, I sometimes, and Susan, it's exactly what you said earlier, like that question of like authenticity. Sometimes I question my authenticity when I try and network, because what am I actually speaking to this person for? Am I just trying to, you know, genuinely like get to know them, or am I trying to do something else? So networking works for some people, but I didn't feel like it worked for me. I felt like it was just many factors that led to my transition to Google, but ultimately it was me who had to make the decision to actually make that change and make the time to make that change.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that one, in order to move forward in one's career, I sort of touched upon it before, but one needs to make time for career development.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And everything that entails, you know, the research, the gathering information. You know, when I work with clients, people, you know, who are also not very happy with the term networking, I say, well, you know, what you're doing is gathering information, talking to people. And this is so important, because, you know, if you just sit there in your bubble, you won't move, you won't get any. So that's really helpful. We are sort of running out of time, so I don't want to let you go without asking this very short question. I don't know whether you can give a short answer, but someone wrote in a really super question. What would your top take-home piece of advice be to someone about to graduate from St. Anne's? So do we have a one-liner? Can you package this? Either of you, both of you?
Mark,
Top take-home piece of advice.
Oof, I'm not sure if it's one line. I'll just start off by saying that. I think, you know, it's, you know, for someone who is about to graduate from St. Anne's, I would go back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, your identity changes and you go from being an Oxford student into the workforce. There's only so much that you can control in your career, but remember that your career is a long time. Your career is not defined by the first, second, third thing that you do in your life. You have got many years to work out what it is that you're meant to do, and you don't need to feel the pressure that sometimes we unfairly put on ourselves to make our career a success in our 20s. Because I look back on my career and there are definitely things that I could have done differently. And I'm glad that not everything was riding on those first few years, because I'm in a much better place now.
Right.
Yeah, I would say, don't panic if you don't know what you want to do.
Great.
Yes.
Don't compare yourself to your friends, to people on your course, because the decision that you make when you're 21, you're 22 will not determine the rest of your life. And once you pick a path, doesn't mean you're stuck on it at all. You just need to take the positives from what you're doing and think about how they can be transferable. And you have loads of options.
Great.
100%.
Options. That's my favorite word in careers. Right, thank you. Well, thank you both, really. I'm sure that there were real nuggets in that conversation, and thank you for sharing. Katie and Mark have generously said, if anybody has any questions, the format for this evening was decided that it would just be a conversation, and the audience would not have the opportunity to ask live questions. But as I said, generously, they have agreed that if you do have questions, you can send them in to the development office, to Stacey, whom you met at the beginning and whom you're going to see again. So please don't hesitate to do that. And thank you all for listening. And I'm now going to hand back to Stacey.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Katie and Mark. That was a really practical and reassuring discussion. There was so much in there, so much valuable advice for our recent graduates, and as I said, so much reassurance for our potential graduates, our current students. I loved how you talked about career environments, how to stay focused on your goals, how to navigate this kind of really difficult work-life balance, and so much more. There was such a lot in there. And what I really loved was your positive message that careers and life will have highs and lows, but it's a long game. Stay authentic, be yourself, and things will kind of be okay in the end. So a really strong and positive message. So I want to really say thank you to all three of you for taking part in our discussion this evening. Really enjoyed that. Just to let everyone know, the recording will be on our website, so you can watch again. Thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. I know we've had a lot of interest in our event tonight, so it's wonderful that people have taken part. We will be doing another one of these webinars in Trinity term, so watch this space for more information on that. And so finally, all remains for me to say is a huge thank you, Susan, Mark, and Katie, for such a wonderful discussion this evening, and a huge virtual clap from myself and from our audience. Thank you.